Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. As always, we're going to start off with our sponsorship shout out. So I encourage you to stick with us for the next couple of minutes. These are all companies I used as an athletic director. I highly recommend that you use them too. So take 3 minutes, listen to our shout outs, then listen to our interview, and then go and visit these sponsors if you're not already using them. I'm telling you, you're going to be glad you did. Here we go. We want to say thank you to Gipper for their support of the podcast. Your students are on social media, and if they're not seeing content that celebrates their accomplishments and promotes your program, you're missing out on a great opportunity. Go to Gipper.com. Their team is going to have you creating world class content in seconds, and it's so easy, even I can do it. Go to Gipper.com to get started, and you'll be very glad you did. We also want to say thanks to Snap Raise. Have you ever spent weeks and weeks with a fundraiser and then been disappointed in the results? Well, those days are gone. Go to Gipper.com. It's hands down the best online fundraiser out there. We used it at our school with great success because it works. Go to Gipper.com. You can check out their other great platforms, but if you're looking for a fundraiser, you just found it. That's Gipper.com. We want to say thanks to Vital Signs Wall of Fame. You're looking for a really cool way to display your school record boards for all the teams, for all the events, or show off your school's Hall of Fame, go to Vital Signs Wall of Fame and take a look at their interactive touchscreen video consoles. It's also a great way to share your school's unique history, brag a little bit about your proudest moments. The website is vitalsignswalloffame.com. We'd like to thank Ohio University and their online masters in athletic administration. Now, I didn't get my master's from Ohio University, but my assistant athletic director did, along with thousands of others. And it was a great experience. It's only 20 months, totally online. And while you're completing your master's degree, you're also completing 11 NIAAA leadership training courses at no extra charge. For more information, go to ohio.edu/info/MAA, the Ohio University Online Masters in Athletic Administration. We'd like to thank Hometown Ticketing for their support. Whether it's more support, more security, or more customization, Hometown is here to help you make the best online ticketing solution. They're the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. I don't think I need to say anything more. Go to hometownticketing.com. It's digital ticketing that offers more. We'd like to say thanks to Sideline Interactive indoor score tables and video boards. Go to sidelineinteractive.com and you can schedule a live web demo to see their scoreboards and their score tables in action. It's probably one of the best purchases I ever made was our Sideline Interactive indoor score table. Go to sidelineinteractive.com. Schedule that live web demo. Sidelineinteractive.com. We'd like to thank Home Campus. Home Campus is a platform that you're going to use every single day. Things like scheduling, results, rosters, communication. Their athletic eligibility and clearance platform alone is worth the price. Go to homecampus.com to get started. That's it, homecampus.com. We also want to say thanks to Huddle. As a football coach, I used Huddle for years, but when I became an athletic director, I made sure that our school was a Huddle school. Our coaches just loved the tools that Huddle provided. Our kids loved the videos. Our parents loved the streaming, but there is so much more. Join the 8 million users. Turn your school into a Huddle school. And we want to thank Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack. Athletic directors already get feedback, but a lot of times it's from a very small group, and all they want to do is complain. Athletic surveys will connect you to that group, but they're also going to connect you to the 98% that support your program. And having their feedback, that information in your hand is extremely valuable, especially when you're meeting with a frustrated parent or maybe your principal or even your school board. Go to athleticsurveys.com. They're going to create a custom survey that lets you take the pulse of everybody in your program. That's athleticsurveys.com. Hey, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. We are truly visiting with an old friend today. Our guest is John Morrison. John has an incredible background in athletics. He's a longtime high school football coach and teacher. He's going to tell us about that. He and I connected, gosh, it must have been the early 90s, I'm going to say, and it was around football, big surprise. Hopefully, we'll have a chance to talk about that. But John Morrison, welcome to the Educational AD Podcast.
Jake, it's long overdue. Great to see you. Glad you're safe in Florida after our latest hurricane, and just really excited to be with you.
Oh, well, yeah, you and again, for our listeners, John and I have known each other for a while. We probably just spent about 45 minutes reminiscing about some old times. Some of those we might be able to share on this podcast. But John, we always like to let our listeners have a chance to get to know our guests. So give us that bio, where you were born, where you grew up, maybe take us up through your own college days, and then we'll take a break. But what's the John Morrison origin story?
Sure. Born in Chicago, Illinois, in the city, but raised primarily in the north suburbs. A son of a divorce, one younger brother, very young when my parents divorced, but fortunately stayed close with both of them. Moved to the Phoenix area when I was a teenager. Went to high school at Arcadia High School in Scottsdale, Arizona, suburban Phoenix, for my freshman through junior year, and then actually finished my high school at Deerfield High School in Deerfield, Illinois, suburban Chicago again. Um, and then undergrad, went to Northern Arizona University, got a marketing degree, a business degree, University of Illinois Graduate School, where I sort of decided sort of what I wanted to be when I grew up, and got my master's there. And then that sort of takes me through the personal part, at least through college.
Um, I want to go back to, that growing up period. You had a younger brother. Um, was sports part of the picture back then? Was it, backyard football and driveway basketball? What were some of the things that you and your brother and your friends did?
That's exactly what it was. My brother, interestingly enough, was sort of more of a musician. I have much jealousy that he can play multiple instruments and I can play almost nothing. But sports was a huge part of my growing up, with both with my father and grandfather, initially learning how to play different sports. Again, during that time in the early to mid 60s, late 60s into the 70s as a teenager, sports specialization was not a big thing. And so, there were 3 seasons in Chicago and in Illinois, and you played 3 seasons of sports. I played football in the fall and hockey in the winter and baseball in the spring. And that was just sort of what everybody did. There weren't club sports, weren't a thing at that time. And we all talk as we get older about the good old days, and I think back to that. It's funny. I was reminiscing about this the other day. I have distinct memories of being 10 years old, putting on my own. All the kids in the neighborhood had our own shoulder pads, our own helmet. It wasn't issued by a youth organization. It wasn't certified. Going down to the park on your bike. Somebody had a ball, and then playing a pickup game of tackle football at 10 years old. And that's what we did back then. And there's a lot of, I guess, positive memories of that, sort of having to coach yourself and pick yourself up and, dust yourself off when things didn't go well. And I'm glad I had that experience.
Yeah, boy, we never did that. I remember once as kid, and it must have been, I don't know, fourth or fifth grade, and we had the biggest yard in the neighborhood, so it was in my backyard. But he had a football helmet, and it was like you said, it wasn't certified or anything. I don't even know if there's any padding. I think it just been hard plastic inside. But he let me try it, and of course, where I'm running, get tackled, and I remember the whole thing just spun around on my face, not completely 180, but I think I'm looking out the ear hole. I'm just going, God, I don't know if I like this, but yeah, those are some great memories. Um, We're going to talk about this more. Actually, you're going to talk about this more. You made the comment, you've at grad school, you found out what you wanted to be when you grew up. I asked this question a lot. Can you think of a moment, either, youth, high school, or college, that at the time that it happened didn't really seem like much, but now looking back with perspective and experience and wisdom, you can point to that moment and say, hey, that was a significant moment for me. Anything
Yeah,
come to
there's
mind
no
for you?
Yeah, there's no question. So during my college days, I worked at a summer camp in northern Minnesota. And there was I was a counselor up there, and it was primarily a tripping camp where kids would come in, they'd go out in canoes and go on week-long trips into the North Woods and different places. But the area that they wanted me to focus on as a counselor was sort of the kids that stayed on campus, for lack of a better term, and they would play different sports during the day, water sports sometimes. But I was sort of the baseball guy, and so I sort of ran the baseball program in camp. And we had a guy named Paul Ellis, who I'm still in touch with today, who ran the basketball portion of that camp. He was from St. Louis and had been a successful basketball coach in the St. Louis area. And I had done a little bit of coaching at that point in my life. I was still in college, done some flag coaching when I stopped playing, but didn't really have an idea that that's sort of what I wanted to do as a profession. It was just sort of something to do that I knew football a little bit, and so I did it. And I watched Paul work with the kids and how much enjoyment he got out of it and how much the kids enjoyed being around Paul. And I remember seeing that during the summer and saying, gosh, if I could ever do that at the level in which he does it, and the closeness and the camaraderie between him and the kids, I distinctly remember that making an impression on me. And I think when I went back to grad school at the University of Illinois, I realized that if I could somehow use my business degree and my graduate degree. And I changed the focus of my graduate degree, didn't change, but I decided to get an emphasis in secondary education. And so I did student teaching. And so when I finished my master's, I was actually certified to teach in the public school section of Illinois. As it turned out, I didn't, that never happened. My career went in a different direction at that point in terms of coaching. But I that memory I have a distinct remembrance of.
That is such a cool story. And it's so cool that you're still in touch with him.
Yeah, Paul's an amazing guy. He's, he runs a excellent golf program in the St. Louis area. So if anybody knows Paul Ellis and is involved in golf in the St. Louis area, any of your listeners, please tell him John Morrison sends his best, and we'll be forever indebted.
We're going to have to get him on the podcast. You'll have to
Exactly.
give
He'd
me
be a
his
great one to
contact
have.
information.
Absolutely.
Let's go and take a quick break. Our guest today is John Morrison. He's the longtime football coach and administrator at Francis Parker School in San Diego, California. We didn't even mention that when we started out, but we're going to hear about that and more. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to say thanks to our friends at Gipper for their support of the podcast. Your student athletes are on social media, so are a lot of their parents. And if they're not seeing content that celebrates their accomplishments while it also promotes your program, you're missing out on a great opportunity. Go to Gipper.com. It's used and trusted by over 4,000 high school and college programs across the country, and it's professional graphic design made easy. How easy? Well, it's so easy, even I can do it. Go to Gipper.com. Their team will have you creating world-class content in seconds. Don't forget to mention the podcast. That's Gipper.com. We also want to say thanks to Snap Raise. Have you ever spent weeks and weeks with a fundraiser and been disappointed in the results? Well, those days are gone. Go to snapraise.com. It's hands down the best online fundraiser out there. We used it at our school with great success. Our coaches loved it. Our parents loved it because it works. Go to snapraise.com. You can check out their other great platforms, but if you're looking for a fundraiser, you just found it. Go to snapraise.com. You're going to be glad you did. Welcome back, everybody, to the Educational AD podcast. Our guest again is John Morrison, longtime coach, longtime teacher, and a personal friend of mine. John, you took us up, through those college days, and the experience you had at the summer camp. Just so cool. Just again, you did a great job describing that. Very visual. Um, Take us on your journey post college. You had several stops, but you had two major ones. Where was that first landing spot right after college for you?
Sure. So while I was in grad school, I decided, again, a lot of because I had that influence during the summer. I wanted to get into high school coaching. I played high school football. I played 1 year of college, but as I tell people, I was small, but I was slow. And so that career wasn't going anywhere. But I was in grad school and I had the opportunity to volunteer in Champaign, Illinois at Centennial High School, a large public high school in Champaign. And so I sort of got my feet wet in coaching, primarily with the lower levels, the freshman level. Didn't get paid, but learned a lot. And I did that for 2 years while I was doing my graduate degree. When I finished my undergrad degree, my current wife and I, my only wife and I, got married. She was finishing her master's at Purdue. I was finishing my master's at Illinois, and we got married. And we decided that at that time, neither one of us had jobs. We're going to move to Minneapolis. We love that area, and so we packed up the U-Haul and we got married in January and moved to Minneapolis. Again, neither one of us had jobs. I got a job as a permanent sub in the St. Paul School District. My wife got a job as a front office manager in a hotel chain, a national hotel chain. And I was a sub and coached JV baseball at a local school, Kellogg High School in St. Paul. But through my networking and through people I had met, I was able to get a full-time position at Morehead State University. And at the time, it was Morehead State University. Now it's called the University of Minnesota Morehead, which is right on the Fargo-Morehead border, North Dakota, Minnesota. And so in the spring of 1985, we moved to Fargo. And fortunately, my wife was very understanding. She knew she was a coach's wife, and I began coaching college football at again, at the time was Morehead State University. Coached 2 years there, and then had the opportunity to be a graduate assistant at the University of Minnesota. And so we moved back down to Minneapolis, did that for a year and a half, very impactful, learned a ton. And from there, we moved to Lake Forest, and I became the head football coach at Lake Forest Academy, which is a very high-level academic prep school in suburban Chicago. So in a way, it was sort of like going home, similar area where I grew up, and started working in admissions there, which was basically just sort of recruiting, and their head football coach there, and then transitioned into the athletic director role as well as head football coach, and did that for about 9 years.
I'm going to let you share a lot more about Lake Forest, and maybe this is Lake Forest too. There's an expression that we use in our profession. It can be, aimed at coaches, certainly can be aimed at ADs, but you don't know what you don't know. What was something that you found out, maybe as that young coach, that you didn't know, or, becoming a head coach for the first time?
Oh, I use that phrase all the time. I think again, I think the organizational tasks of being in charge of a program versus just being a part of a program. As an assistant coach, other people sort of lead the way, and you're tasked with things to do, and you follow and support. As a head coach, you're the one doing the tasking and all the budgeting, the hiring of the staff, the bringing kids in, and the equipment, and all of those things. I think it's on the job training, and people can train you and explain to you those things. But I think, as we all know, and know so many of your listeners know, Unless you've been in that position, it's very difficult to prepare yourself for that position. So it was baptism by fire, no doubt. I tell people I think I was a much better head coach later in my career than I certainly was at 28. That's pretty young to be a head coach, and I learned so much during that time. And fortunately, the people at Lake Forest were incredibly supportive, and it was a neat time because my wife, we lived on campus. It's at the time it was probably two-thirds boarding, one-third day. Those numbers may have changed a little bit since then in terms of the percentages, but we lived on campus. Really got to know the kids well because again, we're eating meals with them. We're seeing them on the weekends, in the evenings during study hall. And we were also starting our own family. Our oldest son was born just before we moved to Chicago and grew up there. And then we actually had another son and another daughter. So we were a family there, sort of living in a family atmosphere, and it was very impactful. And I wouldn't trade any of those years for anything.
Now, you had some great success in any way we want to measure success, but we'll talk about wins and losses. You had some great success at Lake Forest. Um, how was that? What was that tipping point, if you will, from okay, we're building a program, and you're never satisfied, but you say, hey, we're a pretty good program. Can you put your finger on a moment or a season, maybe?
I think one of the keys, and again, I know I'm preaching to the choir because you have so many high level administrators and coaches that listen to you. I think both at Lake Forest and then when we start talking about Parker, I think the biggest key was consistency. I had been both stops there where I was head coach. I was, I had, I came in being well, at Parker, I was the fourth head coach in 4 years. At Lake Forest, I don't know those numbers specifically, but there'd been a lot of transition before I got there. And so I think the consistency of having one person there for a number of years, being able to hire a staff, the consistency of assistant coaches, I think is terribly underrated. When not only for a head coach, but for an AD, being able to have assistant coaches who the kids really gravitate to and understand and know. I think that's when you're sort of building a program versus just having a good year or having a good team.
So I've never really thought about, well, obviously that's a huge point, but the things I'm connecting here, the phrase, trust the process. Okay. It sounds like, what you guys were doing there in building your program. Is that a fair analogy, if you will?
I think so. I mean, listen, I've always believed the coaches get too much blame when you lose and too much credit when you win. The players play the game, and no matter how good as a coach you are, if you don't have good players, you're not going to win as often as if you do have good players. So I think what's the phrase? One of the San Diego State head coach, Sean Lewis, who's new here to San Diego, uses this quite a bit. He uses the phrase talent acquisition, and the talent acquisition never stops. That process, and so I think being able to do that and bring in good people, but again, good people aren't going to come if you don't show them that you at least have the potential to build a program and that you're going to be there for a while. So I think it all sort of fits hand in glove, and we were able to do that there. And it was, like I said, it was a great experience. And again, we got to live on campus. My wife didn't have to work, so we were able to really raise our kids as a family. I remember this so distinctly, like it was yesterday. It's hard to believe it was 30 years ago, but I would come off the practice field, walk into the cafeteria, and she would be there with the little kids, and we would eat our meals in the cafeteria amongst the high school kids. It was just there was never a shortage of babysitters, let's put it that way.
No, very, very cool. Let's go and take another break. I know that's shocking for our regular listeners, but we're visiting today with John Morrison, longtime football coach, longtime administrator, career educator. We're going to take that break, but we're coming back with more. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We also want to say thanks to our good friends at Vital Signs Wall of Fame for their support. If you're looking for a really cool way to display your school record boards for all the teams, for all the events, or to display your school's Hall of Fame, go to Vital Signs Wall of Fame and take a look at their interactive touchscreen video consoles. It's also a great way to showcase your school's unique history and brag a little bit about your proudest moments. The website is vitalsignswalloffame.com. We'd like to thank Ohio University and their online masters in athletic administration. Now, I didn't get my master's degree from Ohio University, but my assistant athletic director did, along with thousands of others. And it was a great experience. It's very affordable, just 20 months, totally online. And while you're earning your master's degree, you're also completing 11 NIAAA leadership training courses at no extra charge. To get more information, just go to ohio.edu/info/MAA, the Ohio University Online Masters in Athletic Administration. We'd like to thank Hometown Ticketing. Hometown is the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. And if you go to hometownticketing.com, their team's going to show you how to set up and sell your tickets online, not just for athletic events, but things like school plays and concerts, school dances, even graduation. And here's the best part. Every school gets assigned a dedicated client success manager that provides you hands-on support every step of the way. That's every step of the way. Go to hometownticketing.com. It's digital ticketing that offers more. Welcome back to the Educational AD Podcast. Again, our guest is John Morrison. John, you shared your journey so far, coaching, Lake Forest Academy, tremendous school, tremendous success. You made the move out to California and took over the Francis Parker School program. But prior to that is actually when you and I met. At the time, I was still, coaching high school football, and I had started a sports cultural exchange. We took high school football players over to England, and we would tour and travel during our spring break and play British clubs, and just had a great time. And all of a sudden, you were part of our program. Share with our listeners how that all happened.
Yeah, so at Lake Forest Academy, because we had postgraduates, we were not part of the IHSA, the Illinois High School Athletic Association. So we could not, regardless of our success, we could not go to playoffs. And I was constantly looking for different things that I could do, especially for our seniors, to give them a positive experience at the end of the year. And I remember I was sitting in my office and I was reading I believe it was one of the athletic administrator magazines that was out at the time. I couldn't even tell you which one. And an ad caught my eye that you, I assume, had put in that magazine advertising your program. And I thought, wouldn't this be a cool sort of experience for our seniors to be a part of in the spring of their senior year? And so I remember making the call to you and reaching out. And I knew our administration would support it because as much football focus as it was also educationally focused as well. The ability to tour and see different sites and do different things. And so I think the first year I went with you, which again, early 90s, had to be, I might have even gone just as almost as an observer. Like I don't even know if I even coached during that time. I think I went just sort of to watch and learn and sort of see the program in action. And then after that, I bet I came back 3 or 4 times bringing kids from our program. And yeah, we had a blast, just a ball. And a number of those kids who I stay in touch with today, one of who actually was here in San Diego about a week ago, or I'm sorry, not a week ago, a couple months ago, but we spent a week with here in town. He still talks about that trip, a kid named Jason Smith.
No, that's I think the only thing that was not 100% accurate was it was actually our good friend Matthew Squire, who was our travel agent. He's the one,
Exactly.
his company actually placed that ad. But no, absolutely. You came that first year. And the other coaches, who's this guy? I said, oh, he's watching. But I'm pretty sure you got involved in a couple drills at practice, and for the next few years, you were back. You're a head coach for us for more than a couple of years, and you always brought great kids. That's what I remember. They were just a pleasure to have on the trip. What's one of your memories that you could share about those days with our listeners? About it started out as the Oregon All Stars and finished up as the USA All Stars. But
I
what's one of
think
your
my
favorite
favorite
memories?
I think my favorite memory was we played a game one night in the moors of Scotland. And the fog was, I mean, you could barely see in front of your face. I remember at some point I was calling plays sort of turning sideways because the rain was it was raining so hard that you couldn't really look at the field. You had to sort of cover your head, and we had our hat. Kathy was my wife was with us on the sidelines. I think she made that trip. We still laugh about that trip, but what a great experience. The ability to travel, and watching the kids, and sort of seeing things through their eyes for the first time, because there were over the years we were repeating some of the spots that we went, some of the sites we saw, but watching the kids experience it for the first time, because it was new kids every time, was really, really fun. And I think you know this, but I've been fortunate enough in the last 7 or 8 years that I've become part of an organization called American Football Worldwide, where we have continued to do, sort of follow in your footsteps. I've led 4 trips to Italy and 2 to Ireland, with high school seniors from around the nation. And again, it's just been incredibly rewarding, and what an opportunity for me and my wife, and to be able to travel and see the world, and being able to use football as a way to continue to educate a young man. It's been fantastic.
No, well, you're very kind to say that, and you're absolutely right. It was just a great experience, football wise, and the culture, the history, and seeing the impact it had over the many years on those kids. You and I already shared this. We'll be in a crowd at a conference or a clinic or something, and you get that tap on the shoulder. It's somebody went on the trip, 15, 20 or more years ago. Very cool.
Exactly. Exactly.
Let's go and get back to the interview. Now, you had tremendous success at Lake Forest Academy. What was it about the Francis Parker opportunity that caught your eye, and again was another great chapter in your career?
Um, so I was the athletic director at Lake Forest Academy, and those of your listeners that know Lake Forest Academy know it's, athletic wise, it's known as a ice hockey power. There's a rink on campus, an indoor rink on campus. Again, because LFA has PGs, postgraduates, they're able to bring in kids literally from all over the world because it's a boarding school. And ice hockey was and continues to be really the focal point athletically of the school. They have other very good programs, but ice hockey will always be, I think, at least in the short term, their number one sport. Being the AD, I was finding myself increasingly spending more and more time in the ice rink. And January nights in suburban Chicago in an ice rink, as you can imagine, can be long. And I really wanted the opportunity to build a little bit more of a traditional high school program in the sense of a day school, sort of traditional, more high school. So I started sort of putting out feelers, and a very good friend of mine named Randy Oberemt, who I'd gotten to know. Randy was the head coach at Knox College, and later on became the athletic director at MICDS in St. Louis, and then at New Trier High School, one of the preeminent high schools in the country. Randy got a call from the head of school at Francis Parker. And our head of school at the time was a guy named Lee Pearson, who unfortunately has passed away. But Lee was a wonderful guy. And Lee didn't know a lot about sports and athletics. And Parker had not really been a real big athletic program. But Lee knew enough to talk to people who knew more than he did. And so Lee, and I learned about this story later on, Lee somehow found out what were the best 5 prep school football programs in the country. And he looked around and he got the names and phone numbers of the ADs at these schools. And he called, and one of the calls was to MICDS in St. Louis. And a buddy of mine, as I said, Randy Oberempt, happened to be the AD there. And Lee said, just started asking questions. How do you build a good football program? And what do you look for in a coach? And do you know of any coaches who might be interested in sort of coming to San Diego and not starting a program, but building a program? And Randy gave him my name. And so Lee and I had a long talk on the phone. And I actually came out to San Diego this would have been July of 1996, but the timing wasn't right. I wasn't ready to leave LFA at that point, and they really didn't have another position to marry the head football coach with. So I went back and coached another year at LFA, and we had a great experience. But the following January, we reconnected again. And Kathy and I made the decision, along with 3 of our own kids, and then a young man that we actually adopted and brought with us, named Gary Johnson, to sort of like the Beverly Hillbillies, load up the car and head west, and moved to San Diego in July of 1997, and we've been here ever since.
Yeah. Again, try not to insert too much of myself into this, but making that move, you grew up in Arizona a little bit, so it wasn't totally foreign, but that had to be a big change going from the suburbs of Chicago to West Coast San Diego. What are some of your memories of those early years?
Um, Fear of regret, some regret. My wife's from Indiana. I'm from Illinois. Our kids all grew up in the Midwest. Really not feeling like, or I guess unsure if we made the right decision once we got here. We bought a home, we settled in, we just the lifestyle, the culture, everything was new. We didn't know anybody when we got here. The people at the school were wonderful to us, but it was it was the sort of thing, and Kathy and I both laugh about it now, where when we got here, I think we looked at it as a short-term thing. Well, we'll be out here for a few years and then we'll go back home, so to speak, back to the Midwest. And here we are, almost 30 years later. San Diego's been wonderful to us. We've raised our family here. All 3 of our kids went to Francis Parker and graduated from Parker. I was fortunate enough, I got to coach both my boys at Parker. So it couldn't have worked out better. But my early memories were trepidation, fear a little bit. And again, when you're moving your whole family across the country and everything is new, there's going to be an adjustment period. And but we were very fortunate that the people at Parker really took care of us.
Now, you already mentioned in the previous segment the importance of consistency in building a program, and certainly you were consistently, sectional champs or playing for that championship while at Francis Parker. Um, any of those years hold special memories? You already mentioned also coaching your sons, but if you wanted to talk about that, what sticks out for you most about those years at Francis Parker?
Um, I think it sort of went in waves, or sections. There were sort of like the early years, and then there were like the rest of the years, and then sort of the end of the years. The early years were, I don't want to say a struggle, because that would be that's too dramatic. I was the 4th head coach in 4 years. And so there had been no consistency. There was no program. There were teams. Each year Parker had a team, but there really wasn't a program. And again, I know I'm preaching to the choir. Your listeners understand what I'm talking about. So I think the number one thing for me was to make sure that they knew that I was here for the long term. Even though I wasn't positive that was the case, I was certainly going to sell that. That we had moved out here from our, a long way. I wasn't just coming and I wasn't going to leave. And I was fortunate in the sense, I mentioned this earlier, Jake, and again, I'm not sure how much you're familiar with this, but when we came, we brought a young man with us
Yeah.
named Gary Johnson, who had played for me for 2 years in Illinois and was being raised by his grandparents. And his grandfather, when I made the decision, when I announced that I was leaving and we were moving to California, came to me and asked if we would consider adopting Gary for his last 2 years of high school and taking him with us. And so Kathy and I had a decision to make. We had three very young children at the time. And would we would we take a teenager who I was close with, but obviously had never lived with, and bring him all the way across the country with us? And so we made the decision we would, and Gary moved in with us and we adopted him for 2 years. And I bring that up because Gary was a phenomenal kid, but he was also a phenomenal football player. And so we added sort of legitimacy to the program almost immediately. And our first year we were good, and then our second year we got to the section championship. We didn't win it, but there wasn't maybe the normal sort of 4 or 5 years of struggle before we got good. We were able to sort of get things turned around pretty quick. But again, good players attract other good players. And I think having Gary be with us for those 2 years attracted other good kids, and we were able to get the program, like I said, righted pretty quickly. And I was fortunate. I was able to build a pretty good staff pretty
Yeah, no,
quickly.
I remember those days well. Gary, he went on to Villanova, right?
Gary played at Villanova and got his degree at Villanova, and he still lives in Philly. He and his daughter were just here with us, stayed at the house in August, and he's doing well. He works for Vanguard Financial, been there a very long time, and has done very, very well. And I couldn't be more proud of him.
This is going to be a crazy question, but I remember that you and maybe the current athletic director at Francis Parker struggles with this, but uh, Parker has a unique color combination, and sometimes getting uniforms was a challenge. Share with our listeners that struggle as a head football coach.
Yeah, I don't think it's as much of a struggle now, but it certainly was back in the day. Yeah, Parker's colors are brown and gold. And those of you who are baseball fans, you've seen the Padres wear some brown and gold, and there are actually, I think, at least there's at least one other school in the San Diego area. I think at the time that I was coaching, there were two. So it was sort of hard making sure that those colors were done in a tasteful way, but we were able to do it. We were primarily all white when we were on the road, and then we sort of transitioned out of brown helmets to white helmets, and we made it work. But yeah, it wasn't hard to figure out what team we were. Let's put it that way.
Well, now the brown jerseys, there was always not always, but there has been talk in the history of football about using that to your advantage of hiding the brown football against the brown jersey. Was that ever, you ever use that?
I remember that coming up in a conversation, but I don't really recall that ever being I don't think that got us any wins, so to speak. But yeah, we would usually wear brown jerseys at home. Sometimes we'd go all brown or brown jersey, white pant. But yeah, I do remember that coming up in the topic of conversation at some point.
Okay. We're going to do this at the end of the podcast, but let's go and do it now. If one of our listeners wanted to reach out and pick your brain a little bit, whether it's about football or leadership or just add you to their network. And listeners, you have a tremendous resource here. What's the best way that they can connect with John Morrison?
They are welcome to email me, and that email address is jmorrison, Morrison, 568 at gmail.com. jmorrison568 at gmail.com. Happy to talk football or coaching or leadership. One of my duties at Francis Parker was I was our ASB, or Associate Student Board um, liaison. I taught a daily leadership class, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And so that was probably, of all the things that I did during my career, that teaching that class day in and day out was one of the favorite things that I ever did.
Okay. Well, there you go. And again, we'll give that email address out at the end of the podcast too. John Morrison, we're going to take another break, but we are coming back with a lot more. So please stay with us, everybody. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We'd like to say thank you to our good friends at Sideline Interactive, indoor score tables and video boards. Go to sidelineinteractive.com and you can schedule a live web demo to see their scoreboards and their score tables in action. Probably one of the best purchases I ever made was our Sideline Interactive indoor score table. Of course, we use it for home games, but we also used it for pep rallies, for signing ceremonies. Their products are tremendously versatile and their customer service is just outstanding. Go to sidelineinteractive.com. Don't forget to mention the podcast, sidelineinteractive.com. We'd like to say thanks to our good friends at Home Campus. Home Campus is one of those platforms that you're going to use every single day, whether it's scheduling, results, rosters, communication. Their student athlete eligibility and clearance platform alone is worth the price. To get started, just go to homecampus.com. That's it, homecampus.com. And we want to thank our friends at Huddle. As a football coach, I used Huddle for years, but when I became an athletic director, I made sure that our school was a Huddle school, and our coaches just loved the tools that Huddle provided. Our student athletes loved the videos, and our parents loved the streaming, but there is so much more. Go to huddle.com, join the 8 million users, turn your school into a Huddle school.
Yeah, Jake, it's funny. You and I were talking before we started recording, and I was on Huddle for an hour this morning. I'm probably on it 3 times a day. I share clips. I'm currently coaching quarterbacks at the Bishop School in San Diego, and every night sharing clips, either from practice that we shot with our drone that afternoon, or clips of the team we're about to play on Friday. So they've just been what a neat idea tool to use as a coach, and how much the technology has changed in coaching over the years. It's been incredible to use, and I know our kids are constantly on it. So can't thank them enough for what they do.
All right, I'm going to put you on the spot, and thank you for saying that. I know our folks at Huddle appreciate it. But for our listeners, okay, I'm a little bit older than you, but I think we've probably been coaching about the same number of years. So I know you remember the old days with VHS tapes and playing
Oh,
video
Jake,
forward and back.
no. This is way before. So, as a GA at the University of Minnesota in 1987, I had a reel and a thing of Scotch tape, and I was hand splicing film together. And you try and explain that to a kid today, and they look at you like you're talking a different language. It's incredible, the technology. VHS at that point was like Huddle is today. It was like, oh wow, you can actually put this on a plastic cartridge and pop it in and rewind it and fast forward it, and yeah, amazing.
I remember watching film as a player. I never had to do any editing. I missed
Yeah.
that, so I'm lucky. Um, from a time management standpoint, not so much you as a coach, but in sharing video with the players, how much more efficient does Huddle make you where you can send them 5, 6, 10 clips versus 40 kids in one room with one camera hoping somebody's going to learn something besides the coach?
Yeah, it's incredible. So the way we use Huddle at the school I'm at now, as well as the school that I had been at, is we don't. Some high schools have prep periods and things like that where kids have some time where you can literally get with the team or get with your position group and watch film as a group. The schools that I'm at and have been at are so academically focused. They don't have those free periods. And so I have to depend on our kids to watch it in their off hours. And the deal I make with my position group, my currently coaching quarterbacks, is they need to give me 10 to 15 minutes a night after they finish their homework. And so I promise them I'm not going to give them more than 15 clips every night. And it's usually a mix of clips from about the team that we're about to play, as well as clips from practice that day, because we shoot our practice film. And then I like to drop in, I learned to do this a few years ago. I'll drop in a little trivia question or maybe a math problem or something, just to make sure that they've watched it, because they'll tell me they've watched it, and I can go on Huddle and I can see
Mm-hmm.
if they've had the program open, but I don't know that they're actually really watching it. They can open the program and, you know, go, take a shower. So I like dropping in a few things, and they usually know I'm going to do that, and so it sort of keeps them on their toes, and at least that way I know they're reading the comments that I'm putting in the boxes.
I love it. Reminded me of that Kevin Costner movie, Draft Day, and the playbook story. Anyway, great stuff. Yeah, Huddle is fantastic. It's almost enough to make me want to get back into being a coach and an AD, but I don't know. If you need somebody, maybe 2 days a week, I'm good. Okay. Uh, let's get back into the interview. One more time for our listeners. We're visiting today with John Morrison, longtime coach, high school athletic director, career educator. John, one of the things we try to do with this podcast is the idea of sharing best practices. So I'm going to put you on the spot again. What are some things that you did, particularly from a leadership standpoint, maybe as a head coach or as an athletic director, or what are some things that you have seen from other leaders that you would consider best practices that you can share with our listeners now?
Sure. So I think where I tried to start from with everything that I did, and maybe it wasn't everything, but certainly most things I did was, and it didn't matter if I was hiring coaches or if I was a head coach and I was hiring assistants, or if I was just trying to sort of build a team. I think, and I wish I could credit this quote to someone, because I didn't come up with it. I don't know who did, but we tried to start everything, and this was a conscious decision we made as a staff, with people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Um, if I think if you start that way with everything that you do and you build off of that, whether it's, like I said, hiring head coaches or hiring assistant coaches or building a program with kids, that will guide you in terms of building whatever it is you want to build, and having not just some success, but sustained success. And I think as an administrator and as a coach, that's what we're looking to do. I didn't just want to build a good team or have one or two good programs as an athletic director. I wanted to build an overall strong program, and I wanted to have a team that was referred to as, oh, Parker has a really good football program, as opposed to, oh yeah, I remember in 19 whatever, they had a really good team. That to me is where everything starts. Um, I am a huge Ken Blanchard fan. Ken is when I was in college, Ken wrote a book called The 1 Minute Manager, which was in business school, was required reading. And since that point in time, Ken is open. He's a wonderful motivational and leadership guru. He's actually based here in Southern California in the Carlsbad area. Ken really coined the phrase, in my mind, servant leadership. And I think as a leader, again, whether you're talking about leader of adults or leader of adolescents, you have to model the behavior. You have to serve first in order to be a leader. And so I think if you can do that, whether it be they are watching you actually do it or they're caught up in your enthusiasm for doing it, I think that sets the tone. And that just sort of ties into my third point. And I actually got this from my oldest son, who is a head coach in the Fort Worth area, Trinity Valley School. Shout out Trojans. Be a thermostat, don't be a thermometer. And I love that saying, because it talks about, you need to set the tone in the room. You need to set the tone at practice. You need to set the tone in the meeting. Don't be the thing that reflects it, be the one that sets it. And so I love that. I love that visual, and I love that idea of, especially initially when you're building something, make sure you're the one setting the tone and setting the feeling.
Boy, I love all those. You probably saw me scribbling some of them down. The don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Um, I think it was maybe a month or so ago, somebody quoted that to me in a podcast, and they said, "Yeah, it's Billy Smith's famous quote." And I was going to myself, I said, I think that was actually Frosty Westering, the great coach at Pacific Lutheran, but I researched it. And long story short, they don't know who first said it. But the earliest um, recorded use of it was a woman, like a saleswoman or something in the 50s or something. But
Well, I want to touch on something you said because you brought up Frosty, and Frosty made a huge impact on me. I never met him personally, but I went to a clinic that he spoke at, the American Football Coaches Association National Clinic. Oh, there you, and that's that Jake showing
I think that you and I were at that same clinic. I think we were in that
we
session.
probably were. And Frosty's big thing, Frosty was a small Division III school in the Pacific Northwest, and Frosty's thing was make it big time where you are. And I remember that because the two schools that I've been a head coach at are small independent schools that don't always get all the publicity or all the notoriety in the papers or on television. And I remember in my mindset thinking, that's what I've got to do. If I'm going to build this thing, because here in San Diego, the small schools have to compete with the big schools. It's not, we aren't broken into division. In the last 11 years, they went to competitive divisions versus size of school.
Right.
And so you have to, if you're going to build a small school program, you have to be able to make it big time where you are, because you're going to be playing those big time schools. So it's so funny you brought that up, because I just, that made a huge impression on me when I heard that.
No, and absolutely, I'm right there with you. You know that I was at small schools for
Yeah.
most of my career, and we immediately took that home and started to say, "Hey, we are big time," and we'd talk to our captains. This is big time. Very cool.
Yep. Yep.
Well, for our listeners, we could go. John and I could go on for probably another several hours here, but we do have. We want to stay listener friendly. But we are not done. We always like to wrap things up with what we call the athletic director toolbox. Now, you were a high school AD, very successful coach, career educator. You certainly know your way around the world of athletics, but we're going to take our final break, hear from Athletic Surveys, who sponsor this segment. When we come back, I'm going to challenge you to send out a brand new athletic director or a brand new head coach, but I'm only going to let you put 3 items in their toolbox. So let's take that break. And when we come back, we're going to see what John Morrison puts into his new athletic director toolbox. Please stay with us. We'd like to thank Athletic Surveys for sponsoring the AD Toolbox segment. Athletic directors and coaches, they already get feedback, but a lot of times it's from a very small group that just wants to complain. Well, Athletic Surveys will connect you to that group, but they're also going to connect you to the 98% that support your program. And having that data is incredibly valuable, especially when you're meeting with a frustrated parent, or maybe your principal, or even your school board. Go to athleticsurveys.com. They're going to create a custom survey that lets you take the pulse of everybody in your program. That's athleticsurveys.com. Well, it's that time of the podcast. We've been visiting today with, remember I said, an old friend, John Morrison. Tremendous career as a head football coach, as an athletic director, as a leader. But right now, I'm going to task him to send out a brand new individual on their very first job as a leader. But I'm only going to let him put 3 items in their toolbox. So, John, what 3 things are going to go into your new athletic director toolbox?
Well, I think, I touched on one of them earlier, which I think is you have to make sure that people know you care about them above and beyond what they can do for you, before you start trying to task them with things to do. So I think that's really, really key. I think, and I know we've all heard this, but I think you have to be yourself as much as you may want to model your leadership style after people. And certainly we all steal, for lack of a better term, things from other people. I certainly have in my career. You know, just over and over and over. I think you have to be you, and be yourself. And we're constantly telling our people that. And I constantly have that conversation with our players about, you know, just be yourself. Um, I think as an athletic director and as a coach, you have to consistently over communicate. I used to have that conversation with my staff all the time about you may think that you've communicated it, but over communicate it, almost to the point that they're tired of hearing about it and they can recite it back to you. Um, I think a big one, and excuse me, this goes with adults as well as students, is I'm a big believer in quality over quantity. I think if you find a few things that you do well, do those things well. The old saying, less is more, can often be very, very accurate. And I'm not, as an athletic director, a lot of times people would come to me and say, hey, we'd really like to start this sport or that sport or begin this new activity. And I wasn't reticent to do it if I felt like we could support it the right way, but I never felt necessarily that bigger was always better. And so I think making sure that you, in my mind, it's always better to do a few things really well than do a lot of things sort of mediocre. So I think those would be the things that I would try and send my new athletic director out there with as well as with a really good dose of sense of humor.
Of course. Hey, we have a fun job, so you got to have that sense of humor. I love them all. You know, the communication is great. One of my bosses, you know, that was one of his favorite expressions. You know, have you over communicated it yet? And the quality over quantity. I remember having conversations just about every spring as an AD here in Florida from girls that wanted to start a flag football program at our school, which in flag football in Florida is huge. It's huge, but we were a small school and, you know, it probably would have bled off of three other very successful teams to where now we've got four mediocre teams. And so we just never could. And I encourage girls, they said, you get me, you know, 15 girls that want to do it that are, you know, not currently doing another sport. And usually they'd get 7 or 8 that were not doing anything at all, and then have 7 or 8 that were key players on other sports. So we never turned that corner. But you're absolutely right. Quality over quantity. John, thanks again for taking time out of your schedule to share with our listeners. And listeners, I'm going to say it again. You've got a tremendous resource here. If one of them wants to connect with you, what's the best way that they can get a hold of John Morrison?
Yeah, again, they're happy to email me at jmorrison, J the letter Morrison 568 at gmail.com. And again, Jake, my pleasure to be a part of this. It's just incredible what you've been able to build here. Just, you know, through sort of beginning through the stages of COVID and now taking it to this level. And you know, as you and I have talked about, you've actually had a couple of my students on here previously, which is fantastic, makes me very proud, and I'm just continued success, and hopefully we'll be able to do this in person soon rather than over a Zoom.
Oh no, absolutely. And again, those students that we've had on who are now adults and quite accomplished in their areas without hesitation, they attribute a lot of their success to the leadership they experienced, watching you direct that program at Francis Parker. So, you know, hats off to you. I'm going to be at the National AD Conference in Austin in December. So I'm coming halfway across the country. You can come the other half. We can meet in Texas there and have a beverage or two. Jan's going to be there. So, you can bring Kathy and we'll have a mini reunion. How's that?
I appreciate that. I'd love to get to Austin, and it's not too far from Fort Worth where my son is and our grandkids. So that might actually happen.
All right, we'll talk about those details when we get off.
All right.
Thanks again, John. For listeners, of course, we want to thank you and remind you that we upload the Zoom recordings of every interview to the Educational AD Podcast YouTube channel. We do this just about every day, sharing stories and best practices. So come back and join us again on another episode of the Educational AD Podcast.